Chapter 28, The Cow Goddess and New Foods. In the Neolithic religions of both Egypt and Mesopotamia, as G. Rachel Levy noted, the horned cow appears with a significance going back to the Old Stone Age. For the cow heads of the Sumerian Copper Age, like the sacred calf of Egypt, had a triangle between the horns inlaid in mother of pearl. That Paleolithic female triangle later stood as an upright cone or little mountain between the horns of Syrian altars. In both Egypt and Mesopotamia also, the symbolic attribute of the goddess of birth was bicornate uterus of a heifer, i.e., the cowhead horns were echoed in the horned cow womb. Even more wide-ranging throughout Asia and Africa, the moon goddess wore the cow's horns, the same horns that appear in later Europe on the helmets of Teutonic heroines. She was the cosmic cow who produced galactic milk, human milk, and the new foods, and who ruled over the sacred herds. She who gives you blessings from heaven above and from the abyss below, blessings of mother life. Her gifts were seen to pour from the sky, from the dark abyss of the unknown, and from humanity. I have breasts, therefore I am, says the Great Mother. These are her words carved in stone in a stone inscription from dynastic Egypt. She was the goddess of the pasture, and the sacred queen or king was ritually nourished from her milk. She was also the enclosure that protected the calves. I am the fold, he is the lamb. She was the gate of the enclosure, as well as the winged and horned gate of the temple. She was the gate of the dolmen womb, two stone pillars with a transverse stone resting over them, as a kind of ritual doorway. Entrance and threshold rites were always performed to her. The enclosure, the gate, the door, the pillars of the temple, all these were her body and were thought to have magic and healing powers. Wild goats were probably the first animals to be systematically domesticated, as they were native to the areas where the first Neolithic cultures seem to have originated. Human children have been suckled by she-goats, whose milk is very familiar in consistency to human mother's milk. In the myths and folklore of many people are the tales of human babes reared by animal mothers. A Spanish legend says that the Milky Way of the stars is really dripping from the udder of a fabulous goat. The galaxy is indeed her milky circle. Women domesticated many animals, surely women, who can produce milk from our own breasts, were the first to think of using milk from goats and cows as human foods. These new foods meant an increase in nourishment, and so a great advance in human practical and cultural development. Remember the clay reliefs of women's breasts surmounted by cow's horns on the temple walls of Ketal Hayuk. Those matriarchal people were vegetarians living on milk and honey, suggesting that their cows were venerated for their milk, but not slaughtered for their meat. In matriarchal Crete, however, every cow is known by her personal name. But it seems that bull calves, who were very unproductive, were ritually killed and eaten. This could be the origin of the religious sacrifice of the sacred bull, son of the cow mother, his annual death and resurrection being a widespread celebration throughout the Mediterranean and Northern Africa. Surely the veneration of cattle among East African peoples to this day is a remnant of the widespread Neolithic mother cow and bull worship. Though cattle herds have now become a symbol of specifically male wealth, especially in East Africa and Asia, still, even today on farms in many countries, it is women's work to milk and tend the cows, and money from milk sales belongs to women. In matrifocal cultures, the human communities lived in harmony with nature's ecosystems. With the introduction of settled farming came a serious danger of upsetting the balance that nomadic food gatherers and hunters had maintained with the environment. The women farmers and gardeners of the Neolithic had to learn to cooperate with the earth through crop rotation, They learned to fertilize fields with human and animal excrement, where human excrement has been widely used to fertilize soil, as until recently in China, people build up resistance to its bacteria. In the Neolithic, at the origin of agriculture, everything went back to nature in an eternal cycle. In a natural ecosystem, one dead organism becomes energy for another life. And the cultivated fields and farmlands developed their own ecocycles. In Indonesia, for example, up to 40 different kinds of plants will grow in the same fields. Vegetable bushes, root vegetables, beans, herbs, fruit trees, and so forth. People develop these wise systems for a simple reason. They are living directly with the earth's capacity for survival, not for profit. With patriarchy, however, with male-dominated farming and the animal husbandry, the plants, animals, and soils begin to be forced to produce beyond their natural capacities. In the beginning of patriarchy, profit was in the form of ego and power, ownership of large herds, domination of agriculture, space, and labor. Even before money was introduced, this kind of personal profit system took precedence over the natural balance of the ecosystem. Healthy cycles were ignored and destroyed. With the growth of the cities and large landless urban populations where more people had to be fed, with less respect paid to the land. Finally, with advanced technology, farming became a business industry, and specialized monoculture methods were introduced. Growing just one kind of plant, like wheat, on vast areas is more immediately profitable, saving machinery and human labor in the short run. But in the long run, with the same crop year after year in the same fields, the soil is exhausted. Insects also multiply in monocultures, and chemical pesticides become a global business. Introduced to kill pests violently, but they also kill off the birds, who are the natural insect eaters, and the bees. And over longer spans, they kill the workers. Without bees, the fruit trees and other plants are not pollinated, and so it goes. Nature works in coordinated cycles, and when a harmonious cycle is destroyed, a cycle of destruction will take its place. Because patriarchal men have refused to cooperate with nature, following religions and secular ideologies based on defiance and contempt for the earth, they have now almost destroyed our chances of survival on earth. It took 1,500 million years for the first living organisms to change the atmosphere so that animal life could begin to be possible. But patriarchy has destroyed so much in relatively no time at all, roughly in 2,000 years. At increasing speeds today, forests are cut down, water is poisoned, the air polluted, the soil ruined. The point is that such devastation could happen only by way of male-dominated religions and cultural ideologies based on hostility towards the Earth's cyclic processes. For at least 500,000 years, human beings survived as pagans, not because they were savage and stupid, as the missionaries of all patriarchal religions could have us to believe, but because pagan means of the land, and its spiritual orientation that linked to people, body, mind, and soul with the intelligence of the earth. In contrast, patriarchy assumes that the earth is stupid and proceeds to replace her ways with man-made ways. With what result? The European Black Death in the 14th century is now thought of to be caused or exacerbated by wanton tree cutting all over England. The rats and mice who normally lived in the forest could no longer survive there with so many trees decimated. They invaded the cities, infecting urban house rats with plague bacteria. Fleas became carriers and spread bubonic and pneumonic plague bacteria to human beings, and nearly 1/3 of Europe's human population was destroyed. Pagan Europeans, Teutons, and Celts worshipped trees. Large numbers of trees were designated as sacred, and there were penalties ranging from mild to severe for anyone cutting down a sacred tree. Anyone found cutting an oak, for instance, had his navel removed. His intestines were then pulled out and wrapped around the tree. His body was thus roped into the tree with his own guts until he died. Was this savage, or was it a way of guaranteeing that no mortal could destroy the life and heritage of a whole people, a whole living world, for his own personal profit? In our own pagan ancestors, were to view the current decimation of entire forests with our permission to turn them into cardboard boxes and toothpicks, certainly they would think of us as something worse than savage. In AD 1000, African men accumulating larger and larger herds of cattle as symbols of personal wealth and status began to graze tame cattle on the savannah, where, where normally only wild animals had ranged, in balance with the region's fertile capacity. The cattle were male property. The more cattle, the more status. Women were bought with cattle. But because these cattle were used only for their milk and blood and not slaughtered for meat, they multiplied rapidly, eating all the grass, and the savannah was turned into a desert. It takes 20 million tons of grain protein to feed cattle, which in turn give back only 2 million tons of protein in the form of meat. So, all the land used to feed cattle is used insufficiently. This is the major cause of world famine today. Land that should be producing grains to feed many people are instead being used to feed cattle that will become food for a relative few. And the way 80% of American cattle are raised, but by the cattle industry, their excrement does not even return to fertilize the fields. Under patriarchal animal breeding, the animal mothers, cows, sows, hens, are reduced to mechanical units of mass production in grotesque denial of their motherhood and the laws of healthy growth. Few people realize that cows have to be subjected to yearly pregnancies so that milk, cheese, cream that form a substantial part of the diet of the lacto-vegetarians and meat eaters, the majority of the population in the Western world, may be produced. Hardly any cows in the dairy herd are allowed to suckle their calves for more than 3 days, if at all. The calves are then reared by hand. Cattle are highly intelligent, and attachment between the calf and the mother is particularly strong. The calves, the inevitable byproduct of these continuous pregnancies, if male, go to the slaughter almost immediately to be made into veal. The rennet used to make most of the commercial cheeses has to be taken from the stomach of the newly born calf, and 80% of the beef industry is a byproduct of the dairy industry. The modern dairy cow leads a life of hell in continuous childbirth, made painful by the cow's unnatural lifestyle and forced passivity, separation from her calf, pregnancies, and being milked all through the years. Poultry is force-fed and force-bred, and all meats artificially fattened with steroids. The mass antibiotics injected into commercial animal feed also remain in the meat, leading to wide-scale disruption of the helpful bacterial growth in the human intestine. Not to mention all the other chemicals, flavorings, preservatives, and color dyes pumped in to make something long dead seem freshly killed. If we are what we eat, then what are we when we eat foods produced in these ways?